At the height of his power, Ben Hogan did not look like a man searching for answers. He looked like a man who had removed uncertainty from the game. The narrow stance, the white cap, the controlled movement of the hips, the expression that barely changed, whether the ball finished 3 feet from the hole or disappeared into the crowd. By 1953, Hogan had become more than a champion. He was presented as proof that golf could be solved, that discipline could defeat fear, that repetition could turn a fragile human movement into something mechanical. That year, at the age of 40, Hogan entered only 6 tournaments. He won 5 of them: the Masters, the U.S. Open, the Open Championship at Carnoustie, in the only appearance he ever made in that event. 3 major championships in one season. He missed the PGA Championship because its dates overlapped with the Open in Scotland. To the public, Hogan appeared untouchable. Inside the golf industry, his name had become something even more valuable. A guarantee, a standard, a commercial asset. And then came the number, $100,000. Not tournament earnings, not an endorsement payment, not the value of a trophy. $100,000 worth of newly manufactured golf clubs. According to accounts of the Ben Hogan Company's early history, Hogan inspected the first production run carrying his name and rejected it. The clubs were not released at a lower price. They were not quietly sent to another market. They were scrapped. The company was new. Its capital was limited. Its competitors were already established. And Hogan had just ordered the destruction of the inventory that was supposed to begin paying the bills. Accounts of the episode say that an investor withdrew, and Hogan later secured a loan of approximately $450,000 to keep the company moving. The decision has been remembered as evidence of his perfectionism. But inside a business, perfection can have another name: risk. Why would a man gamble a young company on a difference that many customers might never have noticed? Why would a golfer at the peak of his fame enter a manufacturing war against companies with deeper pockets, larger distribution networks, and long-standing contracts with professionals? Why did a champion, who had finally conquered the game, decide that winning was no longer enough? And why, decades after his death, would companies continue buying, closing, and resurrecting the name Ben Hogan? The answer begins long before the factory, long before the crash, long before the photograph of the 1-iron at Marion became one of golf's most carefully preserved images. It begins with failure. Hogan grew up in Texas, in a family with little money. His father, a blacksmith, died by suicide when Hogan was still a child. The golf course became a place to work, not a private club fantasy, not a symbol of leisure, a source of income. Hogan entered the caddy yard as a small boy, competing against older, stronger boys for bags and tips. He could not overpower them. He had to observe. He had to calculate. He had to survive quietly. That environment did not create the polished champion people would later see. It created the habit beneath the image. Watch everything. Trust very little. Repeat until the mistake disappears. Hogan turned professional while still a teenager. Success did not arrive with him. His early professional years were defined by unstable finances, missed opportunities, and a swing that could betray him without warning. The most dangerous shot was the hook, a ball beginning toward the target before turning sharply left. For a professional golfer, it was more than a technical flaw. It was uncertainty entering the system. Under pressure, one violent hook could erase an entire week of work. Hogan left the professional circuit more than once. He struggled to make enough money to remain on the road. There were periods when his future depended on whether he and his wife, Valerie, could afford the next trip. The polished legend came later. First came years in which the market delivered a simple verdict. Talent was not enough. Golf in that era offered none of the protections associated with modern professional sports. There were no guaranteed contracts for an unproven player, no large support team, no sports science department studying every movement, no launch monitor displaying club path, face angle, spin axis, and carry distance in seconds. A player either produced a score or disappeared. Hogan responded by turning himself into his own laboratory. He studied the grip, the position of the wrists, the direction of the club face, the transition from backswing to downswing, the movement of the lower body before impact. He did not search for a swing that looked beautiful. He searched for a movement that would remain stable when his hands wanted to panic. Over time, the hook weakened. A controlled fade appeared. The ball began moving from left to right with a shape Hogan believed he could trust. What later generations called Hogan's secret was not a single discovery. It was a control system built around the shot he feared most. By the 1940s, the results had changed. Hogan began winning. In 1946, he dominated the professional circuit and captured his first major championship after years of waiting. More victories followed. The struggling professional became the most precise ball striker in the game. His reserved personality helped complete the image. He was not sold as the warmest man in golf. He was sold as the most serious. The hawk. Cold, observant, difficult to approach. The less he revealed, the more people believed there must be something hidden inside the swing. The golf industry understood the value of that mystery. Equipment companies did not merely sell metal, wood, and rubber. They sold proximity to greatness. Buy the club, use the ball, copy the grip, stand a little closer to the man who appeared to have solved the game. Hogan's silence made the product more powerful. Every unanswered question increased the value of the secret. By early 1949, the transformation seemed complete. Hogan had won 3 major championships. He had become the dominant player of his period. Before the accident, he had reportedly won 11 of his previous 16 tournaments. The years of financial instability appeared to be behind him. The mechanism was working. Then, on the 2nd of February 1949, Hogan and Valerie were driving through the fog in West Texas. A Greyhound bus approached from the opposite direction while attempting to pass another vehicle. The collision was almost head-on. Hogan threw himself across the seat toward Valerie. The movement may have saved both of them. The steering column was driven through the space where his body had been. His injuries included fractures to his pelvis, collarbone, and ankle, along with other damage. Blood clots later created another threat. Doctors performed surgery to address the circulation problem. The question was no longer whether Hogan could win another tournament. The question was whether he would walk normally again. The public story that followed became clean. A champion is broken. A champion refuses to surrender. A champion returns. Real recovery was less convenient. Hogan's body had changed. His circulation had changed. His legs could swell. Walking 18 holes became a calculation. 36 holes could become punishment. His schedule would remain limited because the body that returned to competition was not the body that had dominated before the crash. But sports mythology rarely preserves the daily cost. It preserves the moment. 11 months after the collision, Hogan returned at the Los Angeles Open. He tied Sam Snead after 72 holes before losing the playoff. That result alone would have been enough to restore his status. Hogan did not stop there. 16 months after the accident, he entered the 1,950 U.S. Open at Marion. The championship required the players to complete 36 holes on the final day. For Hogan, every step added pressure. By the final hole, he needed a par to reach a playoff. His approach came from more than 200 yards away. The club was a 1-iron. The photograph taken from behind Hogan froze the shot at the top of its flight. The ball reached the green. Hogan made par. The next day, he defeated Lloyd Mangrum and George Fazio in an 18-hole playoff. A damaged man had won the national championship. The image became immortal. The pain became background. That distinction mattered. The comeback did more than restore Hogan's career. It changed the commercial meaning of his name. Before the crash, Hogan represented technical excellence. After the crash, he represented endurance. A golf club bearing his signature would no longer be connected only to performance. It would carry discipline, suffering, control, and survival. Few marketing departments could have designed a stronger identity. Hogan did not need them to invent it. He had lived it. Over the next several seasons, the legend expanded. He won the Masters and U.S. Open in 1951. In 1953, his game reached its highest point. 5 victories in 6 starts, 3 major titles. At Carnoustie, unfamiliar with British conditions and competing in the Open for the first time, he adjusted his preparation, studied the course, and won by 4 strokes. New York gave him a ticker tape parade when he returned. The image was now complete. The poor caddy. the frightened hooker, the dominant champion, the survivor, the man who crossed an ocean and conquered the oldest championship in golf. That should have been the end of the transformation. Instead, Hogan moved into an industry where control was harder to maintain. Golf equipment in the 1950s was dominated by established manufacturers. Companies such as McGregor, Wilson, and Spalding had factories, sales relationships, professional contracts, and access to club shops. Touring professionals were not only athletes, they were moving advertisements. Their bags told customers which equipment carried authority. Hogan had been connected to McGregor for years, but by 1953, the relationship had deteriorated. Historical accounts describe Hogan refusing to use a McGregor ball that he did not trust. For most players, an equipment disagreement would have ended with a new endorsement contract. Hogan chose a more dangerous path. He would build the clubs himself. In October 1953, only months after completing one of the greatest seasons in golf history, the Ben Hogan Company was announced. Hogan contacted golf professionals directly and promised that his clubs would be produced as close to perfection as modern tools and manufacturing methods could achieve. That promise was not ordinary advertising. It placed Hogan's reputation inside every box leaving the factory. If a club failed, the customer would not blame an anonymous engineer. The signature was on the head. The product and the person had been fused together. That is why the first production batch mattered. The figure most often connected to the rejected inventory is $100,000. In the mid-1950s, that was not a symbolic loss. For a new manufacturer, it was operating capital, wages, materials, distribution, time. The clubs may have been acceptable to the market. They were not acceptable to Hogan. His defenders would say the decision proved the company was different. Competitors could approve products through committees. Hogan could place his own standard above the balance sheet. That uncompromising position created the credibility the brand needed. There is another view. A manufacturer cannot survive on symbolism alone. Quality control must operate within cost, scale, and delivery schedules. Destroying inventory may protect a reputation. It can also frighten investors, delay revenue, and bring a company closer to collapse. Both interpretations can be true. The same decision that created the legend of the company also exposed its central weakness. Ben Hogan was not merely its founder. He was its quality control department, its marketing strategy, its product philosophy, its most valuable asset, and its greatest concentration of risk. The company could not pay every leading professional to carry its clubs. Its larger rivals already controlled many of those relationships. Hogan therefore aimed at a narrower market, the serious player, the golfer who valued forged irons, feedback, and precision over forgiveness. The message was clear. These clubs would not repair a careless swing. They would reveal it. That philosophy strengthened the brand among skilled golfers. It also placed a limit around the size of the market. Most recreational players were not Ben Hogan. They did not strike the center of the face repeatedly. They did not want the club to expose every error. As equipment technology developed, manufacturers increasingly sold forgiveness. Larger sweet spots, more stable heads, designs that helped imperfect swings produce acceptable results. Hogan's philosophy moved in the opposite direction. The player should improve. The equipment should report honestly. The tension was already visible. Was the company building the best product for the golfer Hogan respected? Or was it building a product for the golfer the market actually contained? In 1955, the conflict produced a cruel piece of history. At the U.S. Open at Olympic Club, Hogan appeared close to winning a record 5th national title. Television coverage ended before every player had completed the final round. Some viewers were left with the impression that Hogan had won. Jack Fleck, a relatively unknown club professional from Iowa, was still on the course. Fleck forced a playoff. The next day, he defeated Hogan by 3 strokes. Fleck was using irons produced by the Ben Hogan Company. The first major moment for Hogan's equipment arrived through the man who denied Hogan another major championship. The clubs had proved themselves. The founder had paid the price. The business continued, but the pressure of competing against larger companies remained. In 1960, approximately 7 years after it was founded, the Ben Hogan Company was sold to American Machine and Foundry for a reported price of around $3.7 million. Hogan received cash and equity and remained involved in product design and company policy. From a business perspective, the sale offered scale, more capital, More distribution? A larger corporate structure capable of carrying the name beyond one man's personal finances. From Hogan's perspective, the arrangement contained a deeper problem. His name was no longer fully under his control. A signature had become corporate property. For a time, the partnership worked. The company expanded. The Apex irons became one of its defining products. Hogan continued studying weight, shafts, soles, and the feedback produced at impact. The company developed a strong position in professional shops and built a reputation for forged equipment. But corporations measure success differently from craftsmen. A craftsman can reject a club because it feels wrong. A corporation asks how many units can be sold, through which stores, at what margin, and to which category of customer. As the company changed leadership, Hogan's role was reduced. The business expanded toward broader retail channels. Products carrying his name reached places he would not necessarily have chosen. The brand gained access. The founder lost leverage. That was the part hidden beneath the signature. A name can remain on the product long after authority has moved somewhere else. After AMF, the company passed through a series of owners. It was purchased, repositioned, and sold again. Manufacturing eventually left Fort Worth. The brand moved through larger sporting goods portfolios. Spalding acquired it. Callaway later obtained it through the Top Flight bankruptcy. The name was discontinued, licensed, and brought back. In 2017, One Revival entered bankruptcy. The business reopened under new backing. It grew through a direct-to-consumer model. In 2022, financial problems connected to its parent investment company contributed to another closure. A year later, another licensing agreement brought Ben Hogan equipment back again. The pattern is not unusual in consumer business. Old sporting names carry recognition that a new brand would need years and millions of dollars to build. A familiar signature reduces the cost of explanation. The customer already knows what the product is supposed to represent. Precision, tradition, craftsmanship. The difficult part is proving that the modern product deserves the inherited meaning. Ben Hogan died in 1997. He cannot inspect the forging. He cannot reject a shipment. He cannot argue with the retail strategy. He cannot remove his name, yet the name continues to work. Modern Ben Hogan equipment is marketed through a direct-to-consumer structure, promising forged clubs built to demanding standards at prices below many established premium manufacturers. The model removes parts of the traditional retail chain. That can lower costs. It also places greater pressure on online reputation, product reviews, and customer trust. The modern company does not have to defeat McGregor, Wilson, and Spalding in the same form Hogan faced them. It must compete in a market where a small group of major manufacturers controls much of the premium equipment business, while a growing collection of direct-to-consumer brands fights for golfers willing to buy without the reassurance of a dominant tour presence. Not everyone sees the repeated resurrection of the brand as a warning. There is another side. A company changing ownership does not automatically mean the product lacks quality. Licensing does not erase engineering. Modern manufacturing can produce tolerances Hogan's original factory could only have imagined. Direct sales can give golfers access to well-built equipment without forcing them to pay for large endorsement contracts and traditional retail markups. For many customers, the name may simply be an introduction. The club must still perform. That argument deserves weight. The current business should be judged by the equipment it produces, not only by the corporate history behind the logo, but the timeline leaves one question unresolved. How much of the value comes from the modern product? And how much comes from a man who died before the modern company existed? Hogan had already confronted a similar question while he was alive. In the 1950s, the public wanted access to his swing. They wanted the secret. Life magazine reportedly paid Hogan $10,000 for an explanation. Debate continued over whether he had revealed everything. A larger instructional project followed. In 1957, 5 Lessons, The Modern Fundamentals of Golf, was published. The book transformed Hogan's private system into diagrams, positions, and instructions that golfers could purchase. It has remained in print for decades and has sold more than 1 million copies across its editions. The commercial product was no longer only the club. It was the method, the idea that Hogan's control could be transferred. That promise still drives a large part of the golf industry. The latest driver promises speed. The latest iron promises consistency. The latest training system promises a repeatable movement. Launch monitors convert impact into data. Cameras divide the swing into positions. Algorithms compare one player's body to thousands of recorded motions. The language is modern. The desire is not. Golfers still want uncertainty removed. They still want the miss explained. They still want to believe that somewhere inside the grip, the shaft, the lesson, or the number on a screen, there is a secret that will remain stable under pressure. Hogan became the ideal symbol for that belief because his public image appeared to contain no randomness. The practice was hidden. The fear was hidden. The physical pain was hidden. The failed years were compressed. What remained was the swing. Clean, balanced, repeatable, perfect enough to sell forever. But the deeper record shows something less comfortable. Hogan's system did not emerge from certainty. It emerged from fear of the hook. His business standard did not emerge from financial security. It emerged while his company was vulnerable. His comeback did not erase his injuries. It forced him to manage them. The public image removed disorder from the story. The real Hogan spent his life responding to disorder. That may explain why his name survived every corporate transition. The brand is not selling a man who never failed. It is selling the idea that failure can be controlled if the standard is high enough. The problem is that standards become difficult to protect after they are converted into assets. An athlete controls his name through performance. A founder controls it through ownership. A corporation controls it through contracts. A licensee controls it for as long as the agreement remains profitable. At each stage, the signature looks the same. The power behind it changes. Nothing in that timeline proves that the modern Ben Hogan name is being misused. There is no single transaction that explains every rise and collapse. No public record shows a hidden conspiracy behind the repeated revivals. What remains is not a verdict. It is a pattern. The golfer built authority through suffering and precision. The founder converted that authority into equipment. The corporation converted the equipment into scale. Later owners converted the name into transferable brand equity, and every new revival returned to the same promise. Mr. Hogan Standards. That phrase is powerful. It is also impossible to test completely, because the only man who could define the standard is gone, which brings the story back to the first production run. $100,000 worth of clubs, a young company that needed revenue, an investor who reportedly wanted the product released, a founder who refused. Perhaps the clubs were worse than later versions of the story suggest. Perhaps the figure changed through retelling. Perhaps the rejection was partly technical and partly symbolic. The exact condition of every club cannot now be reconstructed from the public record. But Hogan's decision became the foundation myth of the company because it answered the most important question a customer could ask. Would he place his name on something he did not trust? At that moment, the answer was no. Decades later, the signature remains. The factories have changed. The owners have changed. The distribution system has changed. The materials, measurements, and customers have changed. Only the promise has been kept in the same handwriting. Maybe the $100,000 was never the most important number. Maybe the real value was the authority Hogan gained by refusing to take it. And perhaps the story of Ben Hogan Golf is not about how one man built the perfect club. Perhaps it is about what happens to perfection after it becomes property. The first batch could be destroyed. The name could not. And once the man and the signature were separated, the real risk was no longer hidden inside the club. It was hidden inside the promise.